I've always wanted to say that, I don't know why. Welcome back, glad to have you. Overstriding. So we're gonna talk today, hopefully, and you let me know, hopefully it's helpful for me. Some of these longer posts that I did, these PowerPoints, that I just kind of go through it step by step with you, try not to be too wordy, which I know I tend to do, but just I think it'd be a lot easier to understand if I kind of talk you through it. So we're gonna talk about the number one most common running form fault is overstriding. We talk about why is it, why do we do it? Why does it matter? Well, at least 80% of people, if not more, we're just gonna throw our leg out in front, and it's an extra step for me mentally to bring that foot back underneath. So my body is gonna take the path of least resistance. It's not gonna do that unless I was trained. And why that's important is when I land with a straight knee, I land on my heel. That force, every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. With running, we're dealing with forces up to 2.5 times your body weight. That force is gonna go through your heel, through your shin, and the way that it goes through your shin, it creates this bowing effect, which is why we get shin splints a lot of times, because it's so much stress on the tibia. And then it's gonna go up through your knee. With your knee being straighter, more locked out, imagine jumping off of a building and landing with your knees locked out. Oh, awful. So, and side note, I've had patients in the past falling off a ladder, landing with their knee locked out and on their heel. They break their heel and they break their hip because all that force goes up. So when you land underneath you more and not overstride, then my calf first can help to absorb some of that impact, and then my quad next. And muscles are meant for that, not the bones repetitively. So that's why it's really important that we go over this and practice this. And there's a million ways we can try to fix this with overstriding. So common, and if you think you're doing it, you're probably doing it. So how do you know if this is you? You may get pain in your knee, and we already talked about that for the same reason. 50% of all running injuries are at the knee. 50% of those are this anterior knee pain, or something to do with the kneecap as it goes into the joint. Can be a lot of stress with that. Shin splints, and back to that, the knee tends to be a little bit more honest as far as pain location: front, inside, outside, back. There's a list, what we call differential diagnosis, of things that can cause pain per that area. Front of the knee pain is more common with running. You can get some inside as well and IT, but front of the knee pain is so common: too much too soon or overuse. We talked about shin splints for the reason for that earlier. Wear pattern. Old pair of shoes, it's not good to have old pair of shoes because you want that shoe to be like a cushion of exoskeleton of cartilage that when you land, that absorbs some of that as well. If you look at the outside back corner of the shoe, so this is my left shoe, we'll look at the back corner, you'll see sometimes that's worn down a little bit more excessively. And the reason for that is as we throw our leg out forward, we land like that more. And so we tend to wear out that back corner if you're overstriding. That's super common. Cadence, we talked all about cadence yesterday. We see a lower end of that step rate, usually in the 155 to 160. We'll see usually people that overstride, not always, but they usually have this excessive vertical displacement, this up and down, because what I talked about before too, they're more jumping and bounding versus gliding. So you may see like that trick where you look at a stop sign, look at the letters. If you see it moving up and down, you're probably overstriding as well. You might say that people say it sounds loud when you run. When you're hitting the ground hard and landing out in front of you, it's a lot louder when you land with your heel or the bone first versus more the muscle taking that impact. A good trick that I talked about, I'll probably post about this again later, is if you put headphones in that are noise canceling or earplugs in and you run outside, if you are landing hard or overstriding, it sounds so different. That force reverberates all the way up to your body through your head versus having that softer, that quieter landing. That's a great way to train yourself how to run softer, more quiet, is by having no music, but just noise canceling, and you can literally hear it going up to your head. What else we got here? Slapping. So because we're landing on the heel of our foot, there's greater distance, and that's one way that we'll measure it sometimes, between the front of your foot, the ball of your foot, and the ground. So sometimes we'll see this slapping effect, which is also can be caused, it's also called shin splints, but not true shin splints, but the muscle in the front, your tibialis anterior, you can get some overuse from that. If you're constantly lifting it up, and the more that it's controlling your foot going down, that can be a source of it as well. So you might hear slapping, it might sound loud. Video yourself, either outside if you have to, put a little tripod on, run from the distance, you can slow it down. When the gyms open up, if you have access to a treadmill, video yourself from the side. I had another post titled "Do It Yourself" to video and how to set that up. So these are some signs to know if this is you, if this is something that you are doing. How do you fix it? 3 ways we're going to go over. We already went over a ton. See last post about cadence. Increasing your step rate is a great way to help to fix that overstriding. 2 and 3 is what we're going to talk about. Running drills are some drills that you do that are actually just practicing on landing. Where do you land? How do you land? Impact. This is where plyometrics are really important, is working on not just doing it to get your heart rate up, but proper landing, absorbing that impact, and being efficient. And then my favorite, these are fun, is mental running metaphors. If everybody responded to the same cue, it wouldn't be fun, it'd be boring. That's where it's fun. You might find one cue that just hits with somebody perfect, and then totally different one for somebody else. So we'll talk about multiple ways to say the same thing, and a lot of us respond well to analogies. So, and just like with anything, like with the cadence we talked about, when you're learning a new pattern, it doesn't just happen automatically. You have to be, there's this cognizant state in the beginning. So what I'll usually have people do, like I said, if you're a beginner runner, cycles of 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 1 to 1, where you're running, you're practicing the drill, they're thinking about the metaphor, and then a minute of walking and reflecting. Or minute on, minute off, where you're running and you're being cognizant of it at one point and then not as much at the other. So that's usually the way that I'll have people do it. And just like with golf, I don't want you thinking about 6 different things when you're swinging a golf club or when you're running. My back leg's doing this, front leg. I want you to have one thought and one thought only that makes sense and makes the least amount of input to make the greatest amount of change. All right, step rate, we talked about that yesterday. So some running drills. So here's some of my favorite. Practicing landing under your center of mass. So there's that one where we're trying this free fall drill. And what I do is as I'm going forward, I'm creasing at my ankles, not at my hips. My body's first reaction as I'm falling is for my heels to come up. I don't feel comfortable with falling forward. Running is all about falling forward. So getting yourself comfortable with falling and landing as close as possible underneath you. Here I have a band that I put over a door, put it over my shoulders like a book bag. That's gonna give me some resistance. And I'm working on, as you see, hinging at my ankles, not my hips, driving forward using my core, not letting it pull me back, and then working on landing soft and quiet underneath me. The band will also help you to not keep falling forward. That's a great way. Then we can take away the band and just do it to the wall and practice. And then also more like running just on one leg, just to get comfortable with that falling forward, which is what's gonna help with running. If you're upright or up backwards, that's where we tend to overstride. Having that free fall, free momentum, free energy, and landing under you. Jump rope, one of the most classic, underrated exercises. I'll have people work on double for quick feet, the high cadence or step rate. Single, landing on one leg, soft, quiet. And when we go fast like that, we tend to have that quieter landing and impact because we're trying to not get hit by the jump rope. Great way to work on cardiovascular as well for proper landing. This is one that I'm going to go into a little bit later, but essentially what drives us forward as well is when you go to push off, instead of pushing up, pushing back. So just having people either on a treadmill belt with it off, gliding it back, and I had that post the other day about using your butt to do that. You can use furniture sliders, cadence drills to work on the speed of it. Plyometrics, so this is where it's important. Doing something not just to do it, but work on proper landing. Running, there's impact. There's less impact with walking. With elliptical, there's none. So like if I'm trying to have somebody shut them down temporarily and get them back to running, I need to be aware of this and they need to be able to pass some certain tests for me and criteria of landing without pain. But how we land can really affect where that force goes. So when I have somebody land, it's like you're landing as soft, as quiet as possible, like I'm sitting back into a chair. And another cue that works for people is imagine like the ground is like hot lava. As soon as I'm landing, I'm trying to get my weight off of it. If I land and I just go straight down, all that force, you can hear it, sounds different. You can practice this on hardwoods. Another cue I'll give people is, imagine there's a laser pointer coming off your head. When you first make contact with the ground, point 1, our lowest position, the descend, point 2, the greater that distance, the more that I'm absorbing that impact versus the less, the more it's into the joints, which is not gonna appreciate. So here I'm working on some single leg drills and double as well, just practice the proper landing. All right, these are my favorite, the mental metaphors. So all of these are trying to say the same exact thing about not overstriding. It's pretty much, hey, land underneath you. Some people, the cadence drill works, so they don't have to even worry about this. But I want to give you some examples of what to think about while you are out running to try to accomplish the same thing. So some of these might hit home more with you than others. And go ahead and do me a favor and comment below which one spoke to you the most, or which one did you use that was helpful. And if you have any other ideas, please share. All right, so again, same thing. So cue number 1. Imagine the bottom of your foot is like a stamp. When you land, you want to try to land with that image as flat as possible underneath your hips. There's no landing out in front. That's going to smudge that image forward. Versus here, landing with that image as flat as possible underneath you, that's going to help you to not overstride and land underneath your hips. And what we say about overstriding, that yellow line, that's my relative center of mass. The closer that I land to that, the more I'm landing underneath my body. The further out, that's where we're gonna get larger of that braking impulse or that impact. And you can see we can measure the knee angle at that as well as the angle of the foot. So stamp cue. Coffin, I like this one. Some people think it's funny and goofy. I mean, it is, it's meant to be, but imagine like you are running in a coffin. Got the square around you. And if I'm trying to keep it in tight and compact, I'm not gonna wanna kick that door open in the front, so that's gonna shorten my stride. I'm gonna try to land underneath it, and I'm gonna be able to keep everything in a little bit tighter. For whatever reason, for me, this works pretty well of just thinking about keeping everything in a little bit tighter. And look at the big difference. Here, I'm overstriding and landing outside of the coffin, kicking it open, using your quads, versus using your hamstrings at the end and pulling it back to land underneath you before you make that landing. So, stay in the coffin, don't kick the front door open. Another one is the creep cue. I like this one as well. So again, all saying the same thing. Imagine like you're running in a race and you don't want to slow down, there's somebody next to you, and you come across a creek, and there's a couple distinct shaped rocks. You're trying to decide which rock do I land on to keep going forward. If you're going and you see a rock that's angled up like this towards us, and I land out like that, I'm trying to go forward. What does that do? That slows me down. Versus rock number 2 is underneath me and flat, more midfoot. I'm landing under my body and helping to propel myself forward. So think about landing on a rock underneath you. Cogwheel. I like this one. So imagine like with a wheel, we're trying to roll forward. Our body, we're trying to have this more free movement. We're not just up tall, we're moving forward. If I've got these longer spokes and spread out more, it's gonna slow me down. Every time that goes and crosses over, it's gonna move kind of like a square. That's why wheels are effective. Versus shorter spokes, I'm able to keep that momentum going forward. More spokes is equal to more steps, higher cadence. So imagine your body is like a wheel. Another one I was thinking about today, I always think about weird things when I run and get a lot of these ideas. But imagine like you're running on Earth, and Earth is a big circle, and you're at the very top, and you're trying to spin and rotate that world backwards. Another idea is like you're on a log in the water. You're trying to knock the person off, but trying to keep on top of it. That's gonna help you to keep your weight forward and propel your body forward. So, cogwheel. Hill. So imagine like you're running up a hill. If you'll notice, we tend to uphill, not like this, but we tend to land underneath us more. We don't tend to overstride as much because the ground's angled up. We tend to land underneath us more. So imagine if you're running on flat, imagine like you're running uphill. Sometimes that cue works for people, for them to not overstride. Barefoot. This is a really hot topic. We're not saying run barefoot, but it is amazing. Same person, no shoes, shoes. If we don't have somebody in shoes, you're not going to want to overstride. It's not going to feel good. You're not going to want to land heavy on that heel. You're naturally going to land closer to underneath your body with your knee at a more appropriate bending angle. So as a drill, sometimes going to a field, working on, minute off, just working on that technique. And I've had some patients over the years, it's so cool to see. I've seen some of the best recreational runners, and I'm not saying go out and buy those shoes, but I've had some that in the past, they used them and that helped them with their form. They got hurt, but it changed their form up. And then I saw them in a good cushion neutral shoe, and they maintained that same running pattern. So cool to see. But imagine like you're running barefoot. You're not gonna want to overstride. So you can see the knee and the ankle there. So again, try not to be too wordy. All these things are trying to say the same exact thing about not overstriding. Go and let me know if you've got any other ideas for good cues or which one made the most sense to you. So